Mr. Martin O'Meara.
Concordia, I rise to support the budget as presented here, although after listening to Minister Farry, I'm tempted to join the opposition lobbies with his begrudging and grumbling approach. But I do want to pick up actually on perhaps the most potent point of all this. That will be our relationship with Westminster, which controls the block grant and dispenses the block grant. And I think that is really the core of where we are in this chamber, because I think what unites us is we all wish to see a fair and prosperous economy. But what divides us is our approach to London. And Mr Beggs, who has his head down at the minute because he's like me, he takes notes when I'm speaking, I take notes when he's speaking, is perhaps the greatest proponent of the idea that we can't say to the London Government that there's another way to cut the deficit other than cutting public services and other than cutting welfare primarily. But of course there is another way. And other countries do this. You can also raise taxation. There can be a mix. But it's the obsession of these Tory ideologues on austerity, on cutbacks, which is at fault. And it's something we need to bring up and have to bring up with them if Rio Las Concordia to stand apart from that. Because I don't believe that anyone here wants to show blind obedience to the British Government approach, which of course is good for London, but isn't good for us. I think the second area where we need to try and find some common ground is this belief that austerity is good for the economy, that austerity will grow the economy. And I have my 26-page IMF discussion note. It is interesting that only the IMF could have 26 pages and only can call it a note, Mr Deputy Speaker, Principal Deputy Speaker. But you know what the content and the thrust of this note is, this discussion note, is that needless austerity is not good for society, and that Western governments should stop this obsession with needless austerity. So if our friends in London, Mr Osborne and his colleague, if they insist on pursuing an austerity agenda, it will continue to prevent us from moving into a robust recovery. It will mean that we have to continue this stuttering recovery. It will mean we won't have the money to invest, for example, in marketing our tourist assets. It means we won't have the money to invest in our start-ups, to invest in our early-stage companies. We won't have the money to market abroad to bring new jobs here. We won't have the money, if the Tories continue with their austerity agenda, we won't have the money to fund university places. So on both those big approaches of unionism, I beg to differ. There is another way to cut the deficit, if that's your wish, and of course we know that debt to GDP ratios are the lowest in 300 years. We know that interest rates are historically at an all-time low, but if it's your wish to cut the deficit, there's another way to do it. And if you really believe that austerity is going to revive this economy and ramp up this economy, I think really you're deluded. So, of course.
There will be something in what the member has said, but surely that was what the recent general election was fought around on a UK-wide level. And the people of the UK as a whole, while accepting, not Northern Ireland necessarily, voted for the Conservative Party with a manifesto which said that they were going to do X, Y and Z. We object to all of that, but how is that going to be changed over the next 4 or 5 years?
I thank Mr Farry for his point of information, and I was thinking when I was going to stand up, he's definitely going to fall out with me when I move on to my third point, which is really challenging the London Government, because no one here voted for the Tories. In my constituency of South Belfast, they voted in large numbers for the Alliance Party and for many other parties, but very few voted for the Tories. So despite let me move on to the next point, because then I'm sure there'll be plenty of points of information to give. So do I accept that it's my way or the highway, as the Tories would say? No, I don't accept that. And I believe it's our duty, in fact, to oppose that and to say to the London Government we don't accept their approach. Let me move on to the arts, because last week the Minister Foster and I covered those two great canons of the arts. I covered poetry with T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. She came back with Dickens, Charles Dickens, and I was compared to Wilkins Micawber. Of all the evil characters in Dickens' novels, I think Wilkins Micawber is one of the brighter stars in that constellation. So I'm not particularly perturbed at that comparison. But let's move on to really perhaps a more sombre point, and certainly a more poignant piece of art. At this time of the year, we all think of that great work of theatre. Observe the Sons of Ulster marching towards the Somme, because tomorrow is the 1st of July, and at 9:30 in the morning, with the Lord Mayor of Belfast, I'll be at the Cenotaph in Belfast reflecting on the horror and loss of the Somme 99 years ago. And I suppose the classic maxim to come from the slaughter of the Somme is this idea of lions led by donkeys, that the loss of the men of the Ulster Division, of soldiers from right across this island, for nothing, over many months of combat. The blame for that, history lays on the shoulders of the donkeys who were the English generals. And that's why we have carried that with us to this day when we think of the horror of warfare, this concept of lions led by donkeys. And today, we shouldn't over-egg this comparison, because, thank God, our economic crisis is nothing to the horror of the First World War. But today, there are English leaders who are insisting that the only way forward is austerity, that they're not English generals, but they are English ministers, that they are, and this is where Minister Farry might get upset, that they are Tory donkeys. And the lions we serve, of course.
But would the member accept that really the donkeys, as he refers to them at Westminster, are more concerned with the well-being of their colleagues in the City of London rather than the constituents whom they were elected to serve?
Well, I thank the member for her point, and I think absolutely, and that comes across again and again, that the policies of the British government are wonderful for London, but here they just heap more pain on the poor. So to conclude, and I'm sure there'll be other speakers and other opportunities to give way, but to
I would love to discuss a lot longer, a lot further with him about the 36th Ulster Division, or indeed the 16th Irish, or indeed the 12th. But I think it's unfair to refer to the people who were in command there, to compare them with the people in Westminster. I think that would be an unfair comparison. I'll just leave that thought with you. But I'd like to ask the member, he referred to the International Monetary Fund document. Now, obviously he's read all of them, I'm sure, and he will have read the bit that I referred to earlier, where it talks about debt, in fact, being a burden on the economy, which reduces both its investment potential and its growth prospects, which is the other side of the coin. And I'll just ask Mr. Mueller, before I sit down, what tax increases he would advocate at this point in time.
Well, I thank the member for his intervention as well, and it's great to see such a lively chamber all of a sudden. I want to finish off, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, not by going back to the ping-pong of debate, but to finish in a tribute to the people we serve, because I think from Tattyray to Talkmona, the people we serve are lions. They deserve the best of what we can offer. Our aim is to make sure that they can get the services they're entitled to. Our aim is to build a fair and prosperous economy. So the lions we serve, whether from the Shankill to the Falls, they deserve better than blind obedience to the Tory donkeys or to English ministers. And that, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, that I think is going to form the core of our approach in the time ahead, our approach to our colleagues. They may not forgive me for calling them donkeys one minute and colleagues the next, but our approach to our colleagues in Westminster in the time ahead is going to tell the tale of how well we do for the lands we serve. Thank you.
I call Mrs.